Welcome, everyone, to Watch Challenge. At each episode, we challenge ourselves to find and watch a film of a particular type, and then we report the results back to each other and you find listeners as well. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Mike Wendt. This episode's Halloween theme challenge is Giallo Films. And boy, Aaron, I'm going to have to say, of all of our episodes so far, this was the most challenging for
really?
me.
Challenging to find films, or
Not so much. I think it's just more that it is a genre of film that I know almost just looking at, if you look up the Wikipedia page for Giallo Films,
yeah,
it's like nervously scrolling through, almost having seen none of them except for, one very obvious thing, and I'm not sure if it's one of the honorable mentions or not. So I'll refrain from saying which one that might be.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just I that's why I love doing this podcast and having these things, because it really does open my eyes, to certain films that I probably should have seen, but for whatever reason, just
a lot too.
Didn't. Yeah.
I really only got into horror in general, I would say, as like giving it some serious thought within the last maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because I had friends in film school. Again, like I was on the history side of it, wasn't doing production, but I had friends who were just like, you got to watch Suspiria, you got to watch Phenomena. And I watched some of these, not that those are Giallo, but like,
sure.
Well, actually, no, I think there is some crossover with Suspiria. I think I've seen that on a few different lists, but yeah, I was like around some, but like it just never grabbed me until a couple years ago with actually one of the ones I'll mention. I was like, oh, I know, I should have owned that one already. I should have seen it. So I just blind bought it from Arrow Video, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I don't know if on my blind spot for Giallo Films comes from not enjoying Italian neorealism when I had to study that in college.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I just wrote off all Italian films unfairly. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's like so many of the, you and I are both frequenters of the Cinematheque,
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain Italian directors that come up frequently when when a new schedule comes out. You're like, oh, okay, like Antonioni's got, stuff like that, or why can't I think Fellini, like, obviously, gets a lot of love, but yeah, so I mean, it's like, not that Italian cinema is a blind spot, but this specific genre just seems to be, it was like wildly popular in that part of the world.
Yeah, and I like too, for like a specific kind of time period as well. Like I saw like 68 to 78 kind of thrown around a lot, although it's one of those things like, well, as a genre, or really more of a style, I think is kind of more how I was reading about it. It does have ripple effects and has lasted. And even the Video Archives podcast that Tarantino and Roger Avery do, they just did one with Eli Roth about American inspired Giallo films. So like taking those same genre elements, but doing them in an American context, which is like, oh, that's even more stuff to put on my watch list now.
Yeah.
Which I think I mentioned to you. I one of the fun things doing research on this one, like we definitely try to keep our picks to ourselves until we hit record, which kind of, I think, propels the conversation. But I was saying like, oh, well, my watch list was longer. My to watch list is much longer than my having watched.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I did, as I was trying to find like some good authoritative stuff to give me an intro to it. Like I knew the term, and I knew a couple of the big names, the Fulcis and the Bavas and the Argentos, were out there working within this genre. I was like, okay, I don't even know where the name came from. So I was looking up that. So it was like, oh, what a surprise. It's yellow in Italian. I don't know Italian, but it's just yellow, which apparently refers to these paperback mysteries that a certain publisher would put out earlier that were always had a yellow cover to them, with usually kind of like looked like kind of a circle design where like there was an image inside the circle, but like it was a very identifiable. Like if you saw that book on the rack, you're like, oh, that's a giallo mystery. So like a crime
Yeah.
thriller, maybe leans a little bit more into the horror, psychological. Some of it seems kind of slasher or proto slashery as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, because of the way naming conventions happen with people writing in English, spaghetti westerns are a thing. So now these become known as spaghetti slashers. And I was like, I don't think I like that title as much. I think I like
Yeah.
giallo.
Yeah. Well, it seems there also seems to be a sense of if not like super sexual or hypersexual, or very least like erotic in some ways, which I
Yes.
think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, some of the stuff I was reading on, I was like, okay, this really okay. Brian De Palma is a big fan of
Oh yeah,
this genre
yeah,
because a lot of what they're describing is stuff that I hadn't seen from this genre, but I've seen from Brian De Palma's output, especially early De Palma. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what he was watching and interested in.
yeah. And I think like a good, and I'm not sure if Eli Roth, in Tarantino when they did this podcast, if they talked about like one of the more recent films that kind of emulated this style, was Last Night in Soho, the Edgar Wright movie that came out last year. Have you seen that one, Aaron?
I've seen the film. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it definitely has like some Argento vibes, and
yeah.
it has like a little bit of that slasher, but then there's also like a little bit of like eroticism, but it's not overtly. But I actually that was one of my favorite movies of last year. Maybe that it should have inspired me to look at some of those back then, but I'm usually about like the films of the moment.
Right, right, right. Also, strong central mystery to that one, which also seems like a hallmark of
Yeah.
Giallo from the limited stuff I've seen, but then also reading about it, like lavish sets, bold colors,
Hmm.
really a great sense of like costume design. Like you said, violence, nudity, eroticism. The ones that I've seen as well, one of the things that and I don't know if this is true for the whole genre, but a lot of POV shots because
Yeah.
the central mystery is who is the killer. And they set it up with maybe you see an element of like you see like a gloved hand or like or the hand holding the knife or the footsteps or something. But
Yeah.
switching to POV shots allows you to not even get to see a silhouette. Does it look like a man or woman, tall, short, whatever? Um, so it keeps that central murder mystery. Usually, actually, even I think all of the ones I can think of that I've seen off the top of my head or looking at my notebook, I feel like it's sort of like the reveal at the end and then bam, hard credits. Like there's no and then what was everybody up
Yeah.
to? It's just like, here's the killer, here's the end, here's the motivation, boom, credits. And I was like, all right, I kind of like this. In and out, usually like a tight 75 to 80 minutes, maybe a touch longer on some of them, but
Yeah.
these are not generally from what I've looked at or seen, like, 2.5 hour Giallo, epics.
Yeah. No, I think all the elements that you described perfectly, and I'm sorry if I'm not trying to put the cart in front of the horse, but perfectly described my ultimate pick, or
Oh,
that,
okay.
that happened. So I look forward to diving into
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in the next few minutes here.
Let's do the honorable mentions as we like to do. Maybe a couple films that are either added to our watch list that we're intrigued by, especially in this case as we're kind of, just diving in
Yeah.
to a genre, or something that we have seen that we're like, okay, this is pretty good. Maybe not our picks, but like still a recommend.
One that I was trying to find, and I'm sure I just have to do a little deeper dig, but it's one that I definitely want to check out. Is called Killer Nun from
Sorry,
1979, which is a
Killer Nun.
nunsploitation for horror film. And it says it follows a nun who, after recovering from brain surgery, grows increasingly paranoid that her health is again declining. Uh,
Huh,
and it so like she starts indulging in opioids and
very
spirals
good.
into addiction and madness with violent consequences.
Huh.
To me, that sounds like a fun time.
Strong title and the poster's pretty killer. I'm looking at that right
Oh
now.
my god,
Yeah.
yeah. They
Um,
even censor the butt crack
yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
poster. So
I was going to say that. So one of the ones that I ended up picking. Well, I'll talk about that one in a second, 'cause that's actually my pick for this one. But the
Sure.
titles, the titles and the posters, man. I was
Oh
just going
yeah.
through some lists, just going like, oh my, like the three I wrote down, and I hopefully these are not any overlap pics here, but a suitcase for a corpse, the blood-stained butterfly,
Yeah.
and then one that was called Death Walks on High Heels. I was like, God damn,
Mm,
these they know how to name a movie
yeah.
over in Italy. Holy cow. The first one I wanted to do, just a quick shout out in my honorable mentions, would be the first one of these giallos that I actually watched. It was a blind buy from Arrow Video a few years back, and it's an Argento film. It's actually his first movie that his
Mm,
debut feature film, The Bird with a Crystal Plumage.
interesting.
It was one of those that I was like, man, I that movie's been recommended to me so many times over the years. I'm just buying it. All right, I'm going to throw it on the money. I'm grabbing the Blu-ray. It has I didn't get all the way through yet, but it's got a commentary with like a Giallo film historian. I was like, oh my god, he's rattling off titles that I'm just taking notes. Like, gotta find that. Gotta find that. Gotta find that. So it's from 1970. Again, Dario Argento, his debut, but it's also got Tony Musante in it, who I love as an actor. And I think Criterion featured like him as like they had one of those like kind of playlists. Here's like 7 or 8 of his films
Yeah.
a little while ago. He did one called The Incident, where he and Martin Sheen are two like youth hoodlums that kind of basically hold hostage, not literally hold hostage, but via terror, all members of a subway car. It's like a black and
Yeah.
white movie. Oh my god, it's so tense. But he stars in this one as a guy. He's an American, I believe, or he's at least English speaking. More on that in a second. I think he's an American writer. He's vacationing in Rome, and he witnesses a black gloved assailant dressed in a raincoat murder someone like at an art gallery. So then he's a writer, so he's intrigued by the mystery and he's trying to solve it. But it's also within kind of high-ish society around like the art world
Yeah.
in Rome at this time period. And it's all the hallmarks we already mentioned are kind of like already there in this 1970 Argento film, his debut, as I mentioned. And damn, it's like one of those early ones mentioned is like really kickstarting this genre.
No, it's crazy. He's now in his 80s, and just this past week, in a theater local here to Ohio in Akron, they were
Mhm.
just playing it, called Dark Glasses. I unfortunately I didn't get to catch it, but I mean, for some reason, I was under the assumption like he was retired, or he was just of the age where he wasn't making films
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
But hey, he's still around and kicking. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. Like when you see some of these aging directors still
Still doing
putting
it.
out putting out films. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Did you have any other honorable mentions, Mike? Anything else?
I all right, so there's one other one that I'm definitely adding to my list just
Okay.
because once again of the title.
All right.
But So Sweet, So Perverse.
Ooh.
So it tells the story of a wife who plots to get rid of a rich and errant husband, but is herself the victim of her accomplices. I don't know. It's just so many great titles, so many the posters alone. I
Yeah.
don't know, but I don't know. I mean, I could have easily said Suspiria, for one of the honorable mentions, and obviously that's probably one of the most, that's the one that I knew the best. But
Mhm.
I once again I got to expand outside of that little bubble, I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
guess.
And I've noticed too, when I was searching for where some of these things are being shown at, there's a few that are kind of bouncing around on Shutter, but I was finding a lot once again on Tubi,
Yeah,
and because they just deep dive for some of these I don't know, like deeper archive titles that are out
absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
And also on give or take a few on Amazon, but also some rental fees included there. But you had mentioned, do you want to talk about this with your pick, Mike, or do you want to talk about it now with the idea of like, are we watching these in dubbed in English, or are we watching these in the original Italian with English subtitles?
Yeah, I guess I can just dive into the film that I ended up picking. And one of the before I guess I reveal the title, it's like I noticed by in Wikipedia, obvious is always like such a help with with episodes. But I noticed that almost every one of these titles has an alternative title that it's known as.
Yeah.
And when I first found the film that I ended up picking, which is the Italian title, is The Girl Who Knew Too Much by Mario Bava.
The supernatural powers of the evil eye claim still another victim. Its malevolent enjoyment of tantalizing torture hangs threateningly over John Saxon, Letitia Roman, and Valentina Corteza.
Oh, she was always against me. She hated me.
Madness and the maddening aura that destroys reason fills their every breath with the smell of death.
Miss Dawson, have you ever seen a murder before?
No, I've never seen anything like that. Never.
Oh, stop playing games, will you, Landini? I don't know what you're trying to do, but I know that you're involved in this. Perhaps Nora has seen the killer. But how do we know that he hasn't seen her?
The evil eye, like relentless tides, reaches out for them. And they defiantly hold ecstasy and horror in their arms and touch lips with terror, while the evil eye watches their every kiss and invades their subconscious.
Widely considered the first Giallo film. So I figured, like, when I went into this, if this was a big cinematic blind spot, I should just start from the beginning, right from the horse's mouth. But where I found it first was on the Roku channel, where they had a English language version, which is called The Evil Eye. And that was, so I watched that, but then I found on YouTube, I was able to find the Italian version. And I much preferred the Italian version. I thought the English versions, I'll explain in a second what some of the differences are.
Okay.
But so basically this film, it follows this this very beautiful actress. Her name's Letitia Roman, she had like a pretty good run there in the 60s, but beyond the 60s, she retired from acting, and she actually became a realtor in Hollywood. I guess was a very like well-known realtor until she retired like about 10 years ago. But this is so basically it's about this, you have this young woman, she's on a plane, she's already like, she like runs into this like odd man on the plane who's trying to sell her cigarettes and all this stuff. And you find that the cigarettes are laced with marijuana. So like, that's already right away, like she's like, her first impressions of going to, she's taking this trip and she's just like, already like something's going wrong. Like she's like kind of afraid that she's going to get caught with these cigarettes laced with marijuana. But then she ends up going to stay at this house, and she's going to visit an aunt, basically. And I think she meets the aunt, and within like 5 minutes, the aunt passes away. So it's like her trip is already starting on this bad note. She had this weird interaction with the guy. Aunt dies, and then so one night she's just like walking out around the compound of this, it's kind of like almost like it's a hotel, but it's like a very nice hotel. It's almost like a castle. She notices this woman is screaming in pain and has like a knife in the back of her head. And slowly but surely she starts to unravel this whole plot in which the women who are being killed, it's like an alphabetical order by their last name. So the first woman was an A, the next woman's a B, and her last name starts with a D. So she kind of starts to fear for her life. And it's done really well. At first it moves pretty fast, and then it kind of dips into a little bit slower, but then it leads to this conclusion where the final reveal happens,
Mm-hmm.
and then you realize who the killer is, and I was actually a little bit surprised of who's the eventual killer was. But some of the things that I found really fascinating about the movie, it is shot in this gorgeous black and white, some really great, I'm sure with all other Giallo films is like that. It's just probably marked with great cinematography.
Yeah.
And this was for Mario Bava. This was the last movie that he shot in black and white. And I imagine if this was in color, it would look pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks amazing already in black and white, but I think his camera was just, had a really great way of like every time this actress Letitia Roman is on screen, it's like she is gorgeous and she's shot really well. One of the other side characters that's in the film, or supporting characters, is an actor, American actor, John Saxon, who apparently spoke fluent Italian, but he's probably best known to modern audiences as the cop from Nightmare on Elm Street. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and so he actually shows up in quite a few of these. Not only he was in a lot of like B movies and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
he ended up being in Enter the Dragon and stuff, but he showed up in quite a few of these films as well as Italian, speaking in Italian. So I highly recommend this movie. It is the first. It is considered the first of this genre, and I'm really glad that I watched both versions, just because the American version cuts out all that stuff about the marijuana and the cigarettes
Oh
at the
really?
beginning. It still has like the weird interaction, but it's like it kind of cuts out that stuff. Like some of it is a little more humorous in tone in the American version,
Mm-hmm.
where the Italian is a little more, it's more noirish, more, I would say a little more horror and scary.
Sure.
But highly recommend it if you can give that a shot.
Well, especially because I was looking at it, AIP, American International Pictures, put it out in the States, and them cutting out drug content doesn't sound like that.
Yeah, it
doesn't really
was
jive with how
interesting.
all their other movies were.
I was actually surprised. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like a little bit watered down, but in some of the like, yeah, there's just certain subtle changes that they made with it, and especially in the score.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a more it's way different in the music for the Italian version than American. So the Italian gives it a little more of a mystery, a little more allure, in my opinion.
That's interesting because I was looking up. Les Baxter does the American score, which I only know his name because I like all those shitty beach party movies from from the 60s. And he did a bunch of those, like a lot of like surf guitar stuff, which is weird because like the other, well, I'll mention in a minute, but like some of the things that were drawing me in to pick some of these Giallo films was some directors of photography, but also the score. Is
Yeah.
pretty wild. Like even just thinking, well, of course, something like Suspiria with Goblin, like some of them have really iconic scores, and then let's switch it out for some American guy. I mean, not that Baxter's
Yeah.
a dismissible, musician or anything, but like it's not the same tone.
Right.
Wouldn't think. That is weird.
Yeah.
It's like, why even buy the movie then? If you're so weird, But I kind of wonder when you're talking about John Saxton as well. I know him from like some of those other like the Eurocrime films,
Yeah.
as well, and I knew he had like a little chunk of his career that he went over to Italy and was able to star in films. Also, much easier because there wasn't quite the language barrier that other actors had. Watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a couple years back, the whole section where Leonardo DiCaprio's character goes over and makes a few films in Europe. I was like, oh, it's kind of the John Saxton move. All right. I mean, there were several actors that were doing that, but he's a very well-known one because he did so many over there as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when I watch the American, or watched the American version. They, I don't know, they must have done. They had some kind of technology back then. I don't know how, but like it really looks like they are saying, I don't know if they filmed it twice and they did, okay, say this line in Italian, say this line in English. But like there are certain times like it matches pretty well. It's not like you're watching a Godzilla movie, and it's
Right,
off.
right.
So I don't know if there's just like maybe there's certain similarities in the Italian language with English. I don't know, but yeah, it kind of like blew my mind a couple times. Like I had to like do a double take because
Yeah,
I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
No, he was in one. I was just checking my letterbox list for a second. I think it's called Violent Naples. So like in Italy, it's one of those Polizio Tesco, well, the Eurocrime
Oh yeah, yeah.
movies, and he's in that one, and I don't remember if it was in like extras on that DVD. I bought like a 3-pack, and he's in 2 of the 3 Italian like crime movies. But yeah, but they were saying how it was kind of like what you were saying. Okay, take 2 is like everybody say it in English, and they would just do it phonetically
Yeah.
with folks that they didn't know English too well, which is why you'll see like if you really watch him too, it sounds like you were doing the same thing I was doing. You're watching like, oh, those lips do match up, but it's not a lot of. I mean, even if they're somewhat dialogue heavy, they cut away from the person who's speaking a lot.
Yes.
Like you'll see like maybe a word or 2 as they're talking, then it's a reaction shot, a master shot, like so it kind of bounces around camera wise. So I think it kind of covers up when it doesn't exactly
Yeah.
sync up. Maybe like it's a little way to hide it a little bit, but
That would be an interesting documentary about interviewing the people who had to dub them.
oh god, yeah. Yeah, because there were people that were known as like I mean, I'm totally drawing a blank on actors there, but like if you were watching a Marlon Brando movie in Spain in like the 60s and 70s, there was somebody in Spain who did the Brando
Who
voice.
knew? Yeah.
Who were like known as the Brando there.
Well, yeah.
That develops.
I will say this Leticia Roman, it said that because like basically her film debut was with Elvis Presley and GI Blues, but she was often used a lot of times for Hollywood films when they were dubbed because she spoke fluently 5 different languages.
Oh wow, okay. Damn.
Including Italian and French and Spanish and stuff. So it's like I don't know. She sounds like the most fascinating person, but like her filmography stopped in let's see, let me look here again. Yeah, 67 was her
very quick
last thing, and it was The Big Valley on TV.
Oh.
So what'd you end up picking, Aaron?
So I'm gonna cheat with a quick throwback to another honorable mention because I was so sure this was going to be my pick, and I watched it and I was like, it's fine. But I'm off work for a few days, so I squeezed in another one that I want to highlight a bit more. So the one I thought was going to be my pick is a movie called The Fifth Chord, which is from 1971. That's not a very good title. I was just raving about how awesome the titles are. The actual translated title is Black Day for Aries.
Ooh.
It's a much better title.
Yeah.
It's from director Luigi Bazzoni. But the reason I clicked play on it was the pedigree that went into this movie. It stars Franco Nero, who I love.
Amazing.
So I was like, okay, I want to watch him. This one, one of the things we should have mentioned to the top, like some of the tropes, some of the genre identifiers for Giallo would also be usually a detective is involved or an inspector, I guess, as you would say in Italy, or maybe a washed up private eye of some sort, somebody who's investigating. Usually from the police or an authority point of view. In this case, he's a journalist. So I was already like, okay, here we go. It's kind of like this washed up kind of alcoholic journalist, which Franco Nero can play quite well. And so I was like, oh my God, I love journalism movies. This sounds really, really good. And it is a really good one. It's steeped a little bit more in character development and nuance than some of like the pleasures of like the genre that I was looking for,
Yeah.
But then what really got me to hit play on it was the director of photography is Vittorio Storaro, who did Apocalypse Now and worked with Woody Allen through the years too. Like if you look up his American life, you're like, holy shit, like he's won a bunch of Academy Awards for these amazing like Coppola and like all of the film school generation. The editor is Eugenio. I'm not even going to try the last name. He worked on a bunch of spaghetti westerns. He was the editor for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And Ennio Morricone is the composer. So I was like, oh my God. Like all these four on here. And it is a great one. It just doesn't quite hit the genre beats I was looking for. But I would still say Fifth Chord is definitely worth a watch. And one of my honorable mentions. But the one I ended up going with, which I did as like an additional watch, is one that I grabbed only because of the title and the poster, and it worked out great. It's called The Black Belly of the Tarantula.
Ooh.
Another great title, right?
Night. A time for quiet. A time for evil. Behind the door. Through the window. A time for terror. A terror that leaves a tiny clue, a pattern of blood. Repeated again and again and again. How do you forget? How do you hide from a horror that pierces your most secret moments? How do you escape a death that comes in the night like some monstrous ancient ritual? MGM presents The Black Belly of the Tarantula, a gothic tale of terror and death.
So this one, like, I didn't know anybody who's in it. The director is Paolo Cavara, who I am totally unfamiliar with. The premise of The Black Belly of the Tarantula is Inspector Tellini. So we have our inspector here. He's investigating serial crimes, really a serial murderer, where the victims are paralyzed first with an acupuncture needle that's dipped in tarantula venom. So that basically he numbs them so they're awake so they're paralyzed, but they're conscious when he just stabs into the belly and then just cuts them open. And that's how he kills them. And it's not quite the gory, since we already mentioned Eli Roth. This isn't like an Eli Roth cut your belly open kind of scene.
Yeah.
It is enough where like the knife is in and it's like a slow pull and you see some more blood coming out, but you're just like, good God, like just really dragging that knife slowly through the belly. Like, Jesus Christ. But again, we do have, as I was surprised, I hit play, I'm watching the credits, it's, again, good poster, great title, give it a shot. It fit the genre. Ennio Morricone does the score for it because he scored like hundreds of films in his career. And this was another one he did. And it's great. Like, it's kind of, at some points, like the violins or whatever the string instruments sound a little out of tune, and it just creates this like kind of creep vibe where you're just like, what the hell is going on here? This one too is interesting. Most of the murders take place, and again, these are, murder mysteries. I'm not going to do any spoilers here. The pleasure of watching a murder mystery is you don't know what's going on till the end.
Yeah.
But the investigation that the Inspector Tellini is going into is these people are being blackmailed. So someone's kind of like peeping Tom, these different women for the most part here. Actually, I think exclusively women killed in this one. But also it seems to be all around this spa. So this guy's investigating it, this inspector. But then throughout the whole thing, he's like, man, I don't know if I'm cut out to be an inspector, because he really has some empathy and he seems kind of uncomfortable being around a crime scene. Like he's not abandoning looking into the murders here because he's squeamish. It's just like, oh my God, the serial killer, like this guy's intense, man. Like I don't know if I'm cut out for this sort of work. So it's interesting to have a detective who's not like an alcoholic, but has to pull it together to solve a crime. He's kind of just like, I don't know if this is the right job for me, which is kind of an interesting way to go. But the killer in this one, it hits a lot of the tropes. Like we said, there's lavish sets, like great costumes, good costume design, a lot of pop and colors going on here. It is a good use of color. It's 71, so it's not like color's not brand new, but widespread color. We've got the hang of it now as far as film goes. So it has that 70s like deep red like blood.
Oh yeah,
which is kind of fun. That's what you're looking for in these types of movies. The murder mystery is really good. There's so many suspects where you're just like, okay, it's probably that one. Oh crap, no, it's probably that one. All right, but that is a motive, but it doesn't feel like as a cheat. Like it feels genuine. You're like, it's just kept vague enough where you're like, these all seem like they have a pretty good reason to, or seem to be suspect. And then another great element I love in a mystery is about 40, 50 minutes into it, Inspector Tellini thinks he's got potentially like a top suspect. And then when he goes to confront him outside of a film, like a photo development store, the guy runs and you're like, oh shit, he's got his guy. And then that guy, he gets hit by a car and killed. And you're like, wait, so this isn't the suspect? So like, it's an interesting red herring where it even gives you a body in the way where you're like, wait, okay, so who the hell is this then? And it does keep you kind of guessing. So I guess that maybe there's a little light spoiler there for that one since it's 40 minutes in, but I'm not revealing who the actual killer is. But it's got a cool idea. It's got the blackmail. It's got a bunch of red herrings. It's got a detective who's, searching for the killer. It's got a great score. And in this one, it has those POV shots like we already mentioned, but instead of wearing black gloves, which a lot of the killers do in a lot of these movies, it almost looks like really thick but clear gloves. So it gives it like this inhuman look to the hands, which I found to be really kind of off-putting, but in a good way for, a horror kind of movie. So I would recommend this one. And then this one too, it wraps up like we said, boom, here's the killer, boom, here's the psychology, boom, credits. And we're done. We're in and out. This one's maybe like 90 minutes, so it's a little bit longer, but it's got a lot more suspects it's playing with. So
yeah, I forgot to mention, like mine was 86 minutes, okay. I think, you know, so like it was just like a boom, boom, boom.
None of these are overstaying their welcome at all. Highly recommend The Black Belly of the Tarantula. That one definitely would get me to check out either more stuff that those actors are in or more stuff that director did. I didn't really do too much of a deep dive into his career, Paulo Cabra, just because I finished watching it about 35 minutes before we started recording.
Let's see. I got to look at this. Oh my God, that poster is amazing.
Yeah. Not too, like, I'm not a big spider fan, but I would say you do see a tarantula or two in there. There's actually a like, I don't know what a scientist would be that studies spiders, but there's a scientist that Inspector Tellini goes to interview for a little bit. And it turns out these like glass boxes that these spiders are shipped through, like through customs, they come in via the, planes. They're flown in for research purposes. And it turns out the, what looked like sand on the bottom of how they're transported is actually cocaine. So I was thinking at one point, I was like, oh my God, are we going to have a coked up tarantula in this movie? Which we don't, unfortunately. But it hints at like a broader bit of crime going on as well within the story. Because now you've got like this, spider scientist, for lack of a better word, who's also like implicated in drug smuggling because it's the 70s.
The answer to most things. It's the 70s. It's the 80s. Yeah,
that does sound more 80s. You're right. Than 70s, but, Italy in the 70s, I'll just assume it was just cocaine everywhere as well. In a lot of those crime movies, and there's a lot of cocaine in those movies. So our official watch challenge picks for Giallo Films this particular episode were The Girl Who Knew Too Much and The Black Belly of the Tarantula. Mike, what challenge do we have in front of us for next time?
Our next challenge is film noir. If you'd like to send us your picks for this topic, just follow the links in the show notes. Or if you'd like to suggest a topic, we're always taking listener suggestions, any genres or topics you'd like covered. watchchallengepodcast@gmail.com or in the links in the show notes.
I didn't discover this until I think it was last year, Mike, that like Noirvember is a thing in Film Geek circles online. So this we're actually right in line with the calendar.
Let's take the plunge.
Yeah, let's do it. But until next time, folks, if you are enjoying the show, rate and review it in whatever podcast app you are currently listening to us in, and we will see you with the next challenge.